Welcome, everyone. We're talking right now with Scott Wood, who's the president of the Haverhill School Committee, running for re-election for that seat. Welcome to the program, Scott.
Thank you for having me, Frank.
My pleasure. You know, tell us a little bit about your history as to how because you happened to start running for the school committee when you were a student in school, correct?
Yes.
Give us a little bit of that history and where you are today.
I started running directly out of high school and campaigned right away and knocked on, I can't count how many doors, and was elected back when I was 19, becoming Haverhill's youngest elected official, and here I am today.
That's great, as president of the Haverhill School Committee. Tell us how that works now, because is that a rotating type of basis? I know in the city council, it's typically the highest vote getter that gets the position of president. In the school committee, they work it a little bit differently on a rotating basis. Annually, they change that?
We do annually. It's there's been Mr. Bevilacqua served a couple terms in a row. There's been other presidents that have served a couple terms in a row. This is my second time as president, so it really comes on who's got the support of the committee to the majority of the committee to serve in the leadership capacity of it.
What do you think the biggest thing right now is confronting the Haverhill school system?
I think right now we have a few issues. First is special education costs are continuing to rise, and we're trying to get a handle on those, but they're rising significantly year in and year out, which is a budget buster. We have to do a better job of finding a way to handle our special education department. Part two is the same problem that I think the city faces as a whole, which is the substance abuse epidemic, and we've taken steps.
Well, you have a drug counselor that came in, and then you have another full-time drug counselor that was admitted to the school system as well. I mean, is it a matter of education? Are you getting to the kids after the fact? Are you trying to intercept them before they get into any sort of a circumstance?
When this came about, I presented a couple different ideas, and the first was to hire a substance abuse counselor, and the second was to redo the curriculum and focus on prevention, and the third was to bring in guest speakers. We've done all three. We hired a health teacher, which goes to the prevention aspect of it. We brought in a guest speaker to all of our middle schools, as well as the high school, multiple guest speakers. And thirdly, we brought in the drug counselor so that if a kid has an issue, we have the treatment option available for them as well. So you need prevention and treatment. One doesn't work without the other.
You know, I'll ask you this question. If we're talking about, and I had asked this of some of the other folks earlier as well, and that is that when you typically now, let's say 10, 20 years ago, this wouldn't happen, but now it's almost a matter of course. If you're applying for a job, you're taking the job, you pass the interview process, and they say fine, then go to this particular laboratory or whatever, and they'll do a drug test, and your hiring is contingent upon being able to pass that drug test. That being the case, sometimes would you be in favor of some random drug testing, but maybe not only for students, but for also for teachers, administrators, even school committee people? And I ask that question in this context, same way that many great leaders have said they would never ask anybody to do what they wouldn't subject to themselves to do. If that's the case, is that a possibility? Is that something that's on the table, or is that invasive from a standpoint of privacy? And I don't know. I'm looking for an answer just like you are.
I'd be happy to do it. Relative to collective bargaining, you would have to be able to get that in the collective bargaining agreements with the unions. I'm not sure how well that would go over, but that would be something that would need to be negotiated with the unions. But there are many employers, as you said, that do require it as a condition of employment in the private industry. And I would have no problem. I've submitted to those tests in the private industry, so.
In the private sector,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, okay. I'm taking that into account. When you talk about the high cost of special education, and how that can sort of blindside you when somebody happens to come into the district that you didn't count on, which is exactly what happened, I guess, this previous year. And if I'm not, I couldn't believe it. I had to reread it again to the tune of like $750,000. And when you take into account, divide up how many students, that's $750,000 essentially for like one or two students. That cost is colossal. And my question is, if you're looking for funding for something of that type, I just don't get it. If we are over on our snow emergency budget, then we ask money so that we're able to be reimbursed somehow or get some help from the state. Or if there's a flood in some particular area in a town or a city, wherever it may happen to be in the United States, well, they may qualify for disaster relief from the federal government. If those cases can be helped relatively quickly, why couldn't something of a parallel nature be implemented or applied to the school system as well, so that the volume of students aren't so negatively affected by all the monies then that have to be filtered for just one or two? And I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying at all that the students that happen to be handicapped or infirmed in some way don't deserve the education. They certainly do. But everybody else should not be penalized as a result of that.
Right. The circuit breaker funding, the way that it works now, the reimbursement relative to special education costs, is it comes the year after, which is really not a help when a student comes in mid-year. I think it needs reform at the state level. That's where it comes. And we're not the only community that's running into this problem. This is a statewide problem that many communities are facing, is the rising costs of it. These kids do deserve an education, and we got to find a way to do it and do it right. And a similar program to the snow program that you mentioned, something like that. The circuit breaker program needs to change because, like I said, the funding comes in the next year. It doesn't help us when the student hits us in that fiscal year.
One of the things that you happen to say in your campaign material is that with the strides that Haverhill's made relative to the schools, test scores, things of that type, that there simply, well, there hasn't been anybody that's been let go relative to teacher negotiations and contracts, which that's about to come to fruition again with the teachers union contracts, correct?
Yep.
And it's on that type of a platform that you're seeking re-election, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to ask you this one question. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a period of time that recently it was city councilors and school committee men were able to be able to get themselves an increase in what their stipend or what their compensation package happens to be, correct? You know, I just am asking, it struck me as a little bit odd that happened to be implemented in the same year that it happened to be voted, because in previous administrations, it tended to take the tack of when people happened to vote that because they thought it was right, they said they would apply it to whatever the next term happened to be for the other people coming in, whether it be yourself or other people as well. And I only mention that dynamic because this was at a time that the candidates or the politicians, as it were able to get a raise, yet the school teachers were at zip. They were at zero, and even while some department heads in the city of Haverhill were able to get raises, the rank and file, the people that were eyeball to the general public, were unable to get any raise at all. And I just wonder, was that part of a difficult dynamic for you to deal with?
First of all, it was a myth that there was department heads receiving. I saw the post, but that wasn't accurate information, and that's not accurate information.
In the school department or the city as a whole?
In the school department.
Okay, in the city as a whole, that did occur.
It did, possibly on their side, but I'm talking about specifically the school department side. Since I've been here, we hadn't implemented any raise for the school committee, and this is the first time in over 30 years that a raise has been implemented. So I'm not sure that there was.
Did that ever affect your negotiations at the school unions? I think it would. I mean, I'm just asking.
I don't think that it really.
I'm not saying you don't deserve it. I'm just saying its timing is everything. You know?
No, because there's a myth that the teachers didn't go without a raise, and that's not true either. Every year there's a built-in raise with the contract.
Okay.
Even when it's expired, there is a raise in the contract. So.
Well, that's good to know, and it's good to clarify that. Excellent. Scott Wood, you're running for re-election. You're president of the Haverhill School Committee right now, and you're running for re-election for that particular seat. Which term is this now?
This is my third term.
And you're going for your fourth term. Excellent. We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll be back.